story of the Transfiguration, Peter, James, and John going up on the mountain with Jesus and seeing him talking with Moses and Elijah, being overshadowed by the cloud, hearing the voice that says, "This is my son, listen to him," is a high point in the gospel narrative. The Feast of the Transfiguration is on August 6th, but the story is read as the gospel selection on the Sunday before Lent every year in all three of our reading cycles. It occurs in Mark and Luke as well as in Matthew, and it's in a way the culminating epiphany for this season of showing forth, which is what the word epiphany means. There are a number of fairly common ways to approach this story, typical interpretations and points that get made about it. The story is used to give Jesus divine authority, and God is saying, listen to him. That's how the letter of Peter in today's lesson uses it. The majesty of Jesus, the prophetic message of Jesus is in this way confirmed, in a sacred way confirmed. Also, the story is heavily symbolic. The presence of Moses symbolizes the law. The presence of Elijah symbolizes the prophets. So the meaning that we're to take from that is Jesus weaving these different strands together for the new covenant. Symbolically, this happens on a mountain, and there's a cloud, which is another symbol, and the cloud also adds or emphasizes at least a kind of mysterious quality to the whole scene. All this is an overcoming of the limits of time and space in a spiritual dimension that transcends our own. That's why it's so important. Marking a bridge between Jesus' journey up till then, his teaching, and then his moving after this toward Jerusalem. There's also in this story the disciples' obtuseness, or at least Peter's, which actually is often an element of stories that originate in the gospel according to Mark. He didn't have much use for Peter and the disciples' leadership. But the disciples never seem to get it somehow. Here Peter is trying to tie it down, to box it in with his suggestion of making these dwellings for Moses and Elijah and Jesus. When what's presented here is a reality that can never be pinned down, can never be boxed in, can never be controlled for us for our continued use. On a more rare note, there are those who see this whole story as a misplaced resurrection appearance. This couldn't happen during Jesus' life. It must have happened after the resurrection. I'm not sure why that would matter, but I've heard people debate this intensely over a long period of time. Another approach to looking at this gospel passage is to look at how Matthew changes the story. Both Matthew and Luke use Mark as a source, but then there are things that they switch and add, and you can look at those and wonder about them. Matthew has his own unique flavor. He adds to Mark's description of Jesus' face, for example, that it shone like the sun. He says that the clothing that Jesus was wearing was white as light. and that the cloud was a bright cloud. So I wonder what is it with Matthew and light? Why is he turning up the rheostat so much? He wants it brighter and brighter. So there's a lot here to think about, to contemplate, to apply as you might. But while I was thinking about it, it occurred to me that as interesting as all that analysis and interpretation might be, looking at the story that way really just keeps us at a safe distance somehow from the experience itself, which is really more like Peter and his 3 dwellings than it is like the gospel presentation. The story of the Transfiguration is told maybe not so much to impress or to teach, but to bring us into the disciples' experience. And that can't be done if we stand back and analyze it, looking at this point and that point, or interpreting this symbol or that symbol, as we try to discover some underlying meaning to the story. Its significance is that it calls us to just share a kind of awareness of Jesus that's put forth here in a way that I think is essential for the grounding of real faith. Because faith has more to do with experience than it does with thinking or interpretation or belief or the like. When we have a full living experience, for example, when we're holding someone we love, or when we see a beautiful sunset off of Silmar, or we get caught up in a come from behind walk-off home run in the 9th inning in a baseball game, which would justify this voice, although it's February. But in all those cases, we don't try to think of what they mean. We're just in it. We just experience it. We're caught up in it. We're not even aware that we're caught up in it. We're just there. And that's true as well of this gospel story. The story is told as a way to invite us into the mindset where this experience can become our experience. It's the Bible as a kind of storytelling that the modern world has really fallen out of touch with. About 25 years ago, and I may have told about this before, but about 25 years ago, I went to hear a storyteller named Jay O'Callahan at the Monterey Conference Center. And he told the story of the migration of the now extinct flightless bird, the great auk, in the North Atlantic and Arctic area along the coast of Canada, the islands there. And somehow he was able to pull you right into the scene with the auk in its experience. The story was able to give you that experience. And I can't describe that in words. But he somehow used words to accomplish that. I was in that auk's world, even though it's extinct. We can exchange exchange information in all sorts of ways. But we can't share the life that's in that kind of direct experience unless we kind of work at it. The difference there made me think of photography and movies. Some of the nicest people I know are photographers. Robin, my friend Howard in Iowa City, who there. And I'm very drawn to the photographic arts, to the nuance and depth that photos can convey. But photographs and movies are based on a kind of illusion. I don't want to say they lie, since some of the nicest people I know are photographers, but a photograph creates the illusion of a moment, of a captured, frozen moment, a seeming stopping of time when the subject really is as it's pictured in the photograph. But nothing ever stops like that. There are no actual moments. It's all in process. It's all on the go. And the problem is compounded then when movies try to depict that ongoing motion by taking thousands of individual photographic cells and running them together in such a way that it seems like live action, and makes us think that life is a series of moments. But it's not. When you do that, the connections are eliminated. The wholeness of it all is obliterated. The life isn't there, although it fools us into thinking it is. And then when we think about real life, that's how we think about it. And in a way, that's like reading a Bible story, the Transfiguration, or Moses encountering God on the mountain, or the parting of the Red Sea, or the call of Isaiah in the temple, without entering into the experience that they're trying to shape. Just looking at it as an event, figuring out what that might mean. Using the Bible as a proof text for some belief, or using it to enforce a certain way of life, I think inevitably distorts the truth that it's trying to convey if it's not initially approached as a revelation, which in its deepest meaning is a living transmission of a sacred lived experience. That's what makes it the Holy Bible, is that it can do that if it's related to appropriately. The stories in the Bible are not meant to bring God into our life. They're meant to call us to lay down our life and enter into the life of God. Enter into eternal life. And maybe we need a better storyteller than I am to present the gospel like that each week. We could see if J.L. Callahan feels called to the diaconate, I suppose. But in the meantime, we can each try, I think, at least to listen to it like that. To turn off our analytical mind, our objective thinking that chops life up into moments, and just be with Jesus on that mountain. Sense the bright overshadowing cloud and hear the voice coming from that cloud. The kingdom of heaven is very close, Jesus says. It's just on the other side of a thin wall. A wall that we've built to protect ourselves from danger, to make life manageable, which it's more manageable when you chop it up into little Lego-like moments, but it's not life. And that's based on fear. But as Jesus says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The sacraments, the Holy Scriptures give us openings, give us windows in those walls. If we're open to the experience of a world outside where the light is. Thanks be to God.